One.
Hello, everybody. Happy Friday, TGIF. We're excited to be here today. Lately, in the last couple of weeks, Joe and I have gotten a lot of questions about listing syndication. So today we're going to talk about what is listing syndication in hopes that you will have the tools that you need, the talking points that you need to talk to your clients about what it is, and also know that you have amazing people like Joe Lowry and Jamie Roney on your team that will do it for you. Yay! So that you can understand exactly what it is, how it works, and know that it's done for you automatically. That's one of the benefits of being with the brokerage of our size, is we're going to take that out of your hands and take that task out off your plate and do it for you automatically for all of your listings. So when you talk about, you probably heard a lot about listing syndication, but what is it really? I come from a advertising and media background. So you think about like media syndication, the production companies, the major production companies like Paramount or Warner Brothers or Disney, they're producing the shows, they're making the content, they're making the movies, they're making the TV shows, and then they syndicate it to various channels. Lately it's CBS or NBC, but lately it's also been to Netflix. So someone is producing the content and then syndicating it out to a delivery pattern. And that's what we're going to talk about here today. Other kind of content syndication, for example, on websites, is when web-based content is then syndicated to other sources, but you then get credit. You either sell it, or some of the content that we syndicate for you here internally is you get the use of that content for free. So for example, the Utah Property Guide, the Luxury Guide, all of our videos, we are producing that content. Utah Properties is producing that content, and we're syndicating that to you guys to use for your businesses, complimentary or free of charge. So think of that. Now, nothing is really free in this world, so we're going to talk about listing syndication and some of the ins and outs of that today, and also make sure that you understand some of those components. So if you have any questions real time, put them in the chat box, and we'll either address them real time or we'll wait till the end because we might be touching on those. This is going to be a kind of a big overview level, and understand some of the intricacies involved in listing syndication and why it's not always 100% smooth, but what you can do to get ahead of your client and make sure you understand that this problem can be fixed, or it's a problem on the MLS end, or what the situation is. So hopefully this will be a great educational format for you. And I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful CTO, who has all those magic wands and all those special button powers in the back end to automatically syndicate thousands of listings every year for us. So take it away, Joe.
Thanks, Jamie. So one of the things that's important to know about syndication is that you are essentially using technology to get as many eyeballs as possible on your listing. That's it. That's what syndication is. So Jamie gave us a great example of when she and her team create content and they send that to you. The content is what's driving those eyeballs. Obviously, the goal of getting those eyeballs is to end up with having them click through or somehow raise their hand and say, I am a potential buyer for this listing. I would love to get more information about it. Please use your realtor powers and come to that house and open up that key box and let me walk around with a mask and gloves and hazmat suit and whatever decompression chambers we have to use now to walk somebody through a listing. The way that happens is, you're all licensed agents, and so that means that when you get a listing, you've created a contract between our brokerage, or more specifically your broker, and the person that is going to let you represent them in the sale of this home. We operate as realtors through several channels of MLSs, right? Multiple listing services. Now here in Utah, we have 3. I don't know if you knew that or not, but we are members of all 3. And so when Jamie was talking about the brokerage having your back and being able to send your property to as many places as possible, you'll see how all this sort of fits together as we go through and finish up our time here. We start at the MLS. So if I'm a member of the Wasatch Front MLS, I might log in and put in my credentials. And here at Berkshire Hathaway Home Services Utah Properties, we use what we call a broker load status, meaning you're handing your listing information over to the front office people. So whether that is Jen and her team up in Park City, or that Courtney or her team or whether that's Letitia or whether that's Debbie or whoever else might be you send that information to. The reason we do that is that we want to make sure there are as few errors as possible. And you'll understand why a few errors can create massive problems down the road when we're talking about syndication. So remember that little math exercise we all did around 4th or 5th grade? I actually don't remember what grade it was, but they basically, it's a graphing exercise in math. And they're talking about how slight deviations in angle can create massive change as those lines keep moving forward. So syndication is a lot like that. You can start off by having 2 points that are right next to each other at the starting line. And if one is just angled a tiny bit of a degree to the left and the other one is angled a tiny bit of a degree to the right, if you keep those dots moving forward, by the time you get to the end, you have what? This giant gap between those dots. And so if you have small errors in the MLS entry form, those errors get multiplied as that MLS listing gets sent out to as many of the different websites as we syndicate to, which essentially means that you have major problems if you don't kind of get it right, which is why we here use what they call broker load. So the experts are always basically paying attention to those things and trying to make sure that there's as few errors as possible. When you are inputting your listing information, let me tell you what's super, super critical in terms of syndication. And I'm going to share my screen here so you can kind of see how this all works. So let me get up here and do this. Ta-da! When you're on this listing syndication input form, this is not the input form, this is just the listing on the MLS. But when you get in here, and we're looking at the Wasatch Front, the same holds true for PCBR or the Washington County Board as well. But you come in here and you have an address. So the address is usually got a street name, excuse me, a number and a street name. Below that, it has the north, south, east, west coordinates. You've got city, you've got county, you've got project and subdivision. All of these pieces are critical because if these are even halfway filled in, or sometimes, for example, if we have on this north-south, this is a 11930 south for our good friend Maura Powers listing, and 262 west. If that little W didn't get in there or that little F didn't get in there correctly, when someone tries to find this listing on something like Zillow or Realtor.com, the map that pulls up might be completely off. In addition to that, if someone is trying to search for a home based on physical geography and those little pieces of information aren't correct, your listing won't show up. So we've had multiple instances, even this week, multiple instances where just small errors in the paperwork as it was submitted to Courtney's team or to Jennifer's team were omitted. They're going ahead and putting that in on the listing input form. And that, of course, can create major issues down the road because now you have a seller who's looking for their house on one of the primary real estate portals that are out there right now. And they put in like Sandy, Utah, or in this case, they put in Riverton, Utah, and the house doesn't show up, right? Because the north, south, east, west wasn't input correctly. So the reason we start with that example is that making sure that your paperwork is absolutely perfect when you submit that via dotloop to your corresponding team, whoever's putting in that new listing information for you, is so important because this is going to be reverberated across the entire interwebs, right, all across the world, and we want to make sure that what it's showing is absolutely perfect. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what the sort of the key repositories or the key platforms that these listings sort of end up on. They're all the things that you already know, right? We know that Zillow, in terms of eyeballs, is going to be one of the top places that people go look for a property. We also know that on top of Realtor.com, that's one of the top places that people go to look for property. And what you kind of have to remember here on the syndication side is that, again, the goal is to get as many eyeballs as possible on your particular listing. So if I start with, let's say, a Realtor.com search, and I put in an address, let's put in the same one that we just used here. So that's 2062 West Baumberger, I believe. Wait, I just had it. It showed up for me. There it is at the top. So I put that in. This is the way I'm searching because I've already seen a house and I'm putting in the actual address for that house and I hit search. But just as easily, you can search by neighborhood, you can search by city, you can search by any one of those places. And so the amount of places where this can go wrong are many, okay? One of the things that you should know is that we here at Utah Properties are syndicating your listing to no less than 100+ portals. So now what that means by portal is Realtor.com is indeed a website, but it is also owned by a larger company that owns several other real estate related websites. And our relationship with them allows your listing to appear not just on Realtor.com, but on all the other websites that that particular portal, that particular company owns. And the best way to kind of get your head around that is to take a look at a product that Jamie and I implemented several years ago that's called ListHub. So ListHub, it serves as a relay between our MLSs, so the 3 MLSs that we have, and it relays all of the listing information that goes live on the MLS out to all of these different portals. I'm going to show you a page that is available to you in ListHub that you probably never clicked on. They call it the publisher page. And again, they call these publishers based on the network, and these are not individual websites in all cases. Many times, this is a publisher that owns many different websites. So when you're having a listing presentation, you're talking to somebody about how many places their listing is going to go show up. You're going to say it's well over 100 unique websites, but we sometimes don't know the exact number because a lot of these publishers will have either versions of their website that show up in Spanish or versions of their website that perhaps are located from Mexico or from other parts of the globe. But if you look down here and you look at all these different places that your listing is going to go, right? A lot of these things you probably have never even heard of, and sometimes you probably don't care to know all these things or memorize all these things. But there's quite a few here that are kind of important to know. Like, for example, this one is Joy here. This is a website that Berkshire Hathaway, the corporation, home services out of Irvine, California. They make sure that all of your listings actually syndicate out and translate into Chinese. So this is essentially, they call that the Chinese Zillow, and other types of places where potential buyers might be looking for your particular listing. It also includes things like Century 21 and Remax. Yes, we want our listings to show up on other real estate brokerage websites. Why? Because if for whatever reason somebody starts their home search at one of these brokerages, we want to make sure that we can present our best foot forward in terms of that listing and have that show up everywhere it possibly can go. So you see things like Home Finder, Homes.com, so on and so forth. But all of this is taken care of for you. So again, if we go back to what Jamie said at the beginning, you have an entire team of people here that are looking out to make sure that if you get your listing paperwork submitted correctly, we're going to make sure that this goes to as many places as we know that there are eyeballs, right? And when those eyeballs are on there, that's when it goes ahead and hopefully generates some sort of buyer interest for you to have something happen. I want to just point out one of the newest ones that we've got enabled. I got a call from a team up in the Park City area who was having a conversation with one of their people that were selling their home. They were representing the seller, who was using this thing called Nextdoor. Now, Nextdoor came on the sort of popularity here about, it's probably about 2 years ago. It started out as just one of these neighbor-to-neighbor sort of chat groups, kind of like a social media group for a neighborhood, where people can do everything from talk about they have some extra storage space to whatever. And of course, because they are a company, Nextdoor began essentially serving up ads to the people that were on their particular social media platform. One of those things that they started to light up about a year ago was real estate ads for real estate agents. Now that has translated into listings. So in this particular case, we have this group up in Park City. Their assistant called me and said, hey, we have a seller that's curious why his listing is not on Nextdoor.com. So through the magic of back-end emails and phone calls and trying to yell up and down about how come our listings aren't showing up there, we got a relationship going with them via ListHub, and now all the listings on both the Wasatch Front and the Wasatch Back are now syndicating out to Nextdoor. We still work with the Washington County Board of Realtors, so if you're down there in St. George, just know that we're constantly working and trying to tweak the relationship with the MLS there so we can get equal number of syndications. But those are all part of this particular scenario, and I believe we have Nextdoor lit up down there in Washington County as well. So the idea here is that once your listing goes live, if the information is correct, all of these different websites will be able to go and you'll be able to find where these places are. So for an example, on a report, I'm just going to go down here to our inventory. Excuse me. I'm going to get one that's not commercial. We'll do this one in Park City here. And we'll take a look at what that actually means in terms of where these things are coming from. So if I open up this seller report for any one of these listings, what you see here on the report is where the majority of the eyeballs for this particular property are coming from. So if you'll see here that the #1 page or portal that somebody starts a search for this particular property for Kevin Jensen happens to be on our own website, right? So in the past week, he's had 256 views of that particular property that have come from our website. And yes, our personal website is also a receiver of syndicated information from the MLS. So keep in mind at the beginning, what we talked about was MLS is the source of all of this listing information. We pay for those feeds to then go be sent to all these other different places. So the brokerage picks up the cost for that to have them sent. If any of you have ever had to try to build your own custom website, your own custom real estate website, you know that as an agent, you have to pay the MLS a fee for the MLS to give you the right to display their listings on your website, excuse me. And we as a brokerage also have to pay a fee for every single time one of these feeds goes out to any one of these websites. And so that's another way that we're picking up the cost for you and making sure that you guys can get on the business of selling stuff and not have to worry so much about these other things. But below that, you'll notice that after 256, we had 146 come from Realtor.com. So this particular listing right here, Realtor.com is our #2. And you notice this little phone icon here? That has sort of changed the game in terms of syndication, because we know that you might have a potential buyer driving a physical neighborhood, right? They might be driving around a neighborhood saying, I like this neighborhood. Why don't we look for houses that might be for sale around this particular neighborhood? And we know that they're searching for properties on their phone. So one of the other reasons that we have selected ListHub as one of these syndication go-betweens is that it gives us a little bit of that data. Now, can anyone on this call think about a tool that you have available to you as Berkshire Hathaway Home Services Utah Properties agent that also goes on a phone, that maybe also helps people find potential listings or see your listings when they're driving around? That's right, your mobile app. And so go to the learning channel on YouTube or go to the intranet and you can watch. There's a whole marketing tech training that's based around just your mobile app. But just to give you, kind of an idea of what's going on. So that mobile app that we have on our phone is also a syndicated listing repository, meaning we're paying to have that go and show up on those particular things. Now you see down here, what additional websites are there? Nextdoor.com, Point2 Homes. And many of you might be saying, Point2 Homes, I've never even been to that website. My listing is on Point2 Homes. The answer is yes, your listing is there. Again, going back to what we said before, making sure that your paperwork is extremely accurate so that when they're loaded, that again, your website is represented as well as it possibly can be across all these different portals. Down here is why I wanted to bring you to this particular report. There's this little thing that shows up at the bottom here, and if you're having a particular listing that might be challenging and you have the homeowner saying, what are you doing for me and how are you digitally marketing my home, now you know what I would say. My brokerage is syndicating your listing to well over 100 web portals, right? And in those web portals, we are getting traffic from all over the world. And down here, you start to see a whole bunch of places that you've never heard of that your listing is showing up. Places like Back at You Media or Harmon Homes or Keyboom or Ideal Real Estate or any one of these particular links where your listing is now showing up because of how that particular process goes.
And just to clarify also, a portal isn't a website. So well over 100 portals could mean hundreds and hundreds of websites because any given portal can have dozens of websites. Does that make sense?
Yeah, great reminder.
Well over 100 portals that lead to aspire out of various websites in addition. So go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, it's a huge point. And so, as you mentioned before, in ListHub, they call them publishers, right? But in terms of a technology, you probably heard them as a portal. Google is a portal. Google is a search portal. So when you go in there and you're searching on Google, Google owns hundreds, if not thousands of individual URLs, right? So Google is the portal, but gmail.google.com is an example of one of those sub-websites, or maps.google.com is another one. So you can see how that starts to branch out and how your listing can show up in lots of different places. So let's take a look at maybe probably the two most popular in terms of name recognition and also in terms of total traffic and how they operate with syndication. So we'll start with Realtor.com. So back here on Realtor.com, let me share my screen again. Back here on Realtor.com, what we're going to get, pull that up here, make sure it's highlighted correctly. Not sure where it went. You can stop sharing. Sorry, here we go. I was a little too quick with the mouse. Make sure that that's up there and going correctly. There we go. Okay. I don't think it's sharing my Chrome here. Hang on one second. Let's get this right. There we go. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so now that we're looking at Realtor.com, and we already talked about how the way you search for property might not be the way somebody else searches for properties, and so the way that you understand this is a very good, opportunity for you to explain this to your seller. So one of the things that happened very, very recently, and let me see if I can go back out here and get the right address, but we had a property from Jill Stringham that did not have the correct coordinates on the map. So going to Realtor.com here and typing in 218 Rado, which was her property address, 218 Rada Lane. So what happened was the owner of this home went to Realtor.com and started to search for this listing, his own listing, right, in Draper, and the listing didn't show up on the map. So if you come down on here, all of these real estate portals enjoy the same sort of functions. They like to show you what's going on. They want to show you the schools in the area. They want to show you the neighborhood. And all of them have a mapping feature, right? So you can see that down here in Realtor.com, that's the mapping feature right there, that little icon. So when you click on that particular map, when this map pulled up, they got this error. The Google Map View is not available for this location. Well, how can that happen? The listing was input correctly. All the data was right on the listing input form. It was loaded into the MLS correctly. And the actual pin on where this particular property was sent was showing up incorrectly. And so this is a great example of transitioning to what happens if your listing is not showing up correctly on one of these syndicated portals. You call me or you email me, or you can email Jamie or her team, but you're basically, this is what we need. We need to know what the MLS number is. We need to know the address and any information you have about what is going wrong. And it could be anything from the map pin is not showing up correctly, or it could be Zillow is listing the incorrect number of bathrooms. It could be that the Zillow is saying that it's off market when it's actually for sale. It could be that Realtor.com is not showing the correct pictures. Any one of these sets of errors can and will happen, right? And the reason being is that they are pulling millions of listings from tens of thousands of MLSs across the country, and they're trying to make sure that all of those ones and zeros sort correctly and they show up in the right website at the right time. So when something like this goes wrong, for this case right here, we don't have the right map pin for your particular listing. If you email me what's going on and what is incorrect about it, in this case, Jill said the map pin's not showing up, and then she took a picture of where the pin should have been. And I had to actually go to Google, find the actual latitude and longitude of this particular address. I had to tell Google that they had the incorrect position. And then I had to get on the phone with Realtor.com and supply them with all of the Google Maps information on how to fix that particular listing. So this one is actually still being updated. Typically, it's about 48 hours for any one of these portals to fix something. Zillow has been fortunately a lot quicker lately. Realtor.com, unfortunately, has been a lot slower lately. But this comes back to one of the key points that we want to talk about today. What do you tell your seller if their property is not being shown correctly on one of these portals? So let me just stop sharing here for a second, and so you can see how serious I am. the passion in my eyes about this. We want to make sure that anyone that owns a home and is trying to sell their home has the best experience possible. Here at Utah Properties, we commit ourselves and we believe strongly in having a luxury experience for every property that we list. So it doesn't matter if it's a $180,000 townhouse somewhere, or if it's a $18 million home up in Deer Valley. The experience of working with us needs to be a luxury premium, the top of the line, AAA, everything that you could possibly imagine. The first thing you need to tell them is, I have a team that is working on this. That's the first thing, okay? I have a team that's working on this, because you do. You have behind you a team of technical, I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I'm okay on a keyboard. But you have a team of people that are looking to make sure that their property is going to be shown in the best possible light, no matter what portal this happens to be on. Over the last several years, Jamie and I have developed relationships with the support teams on all of these big portals. Now, that doesn't mean that I have a phone number. I can't call the back phone at Zillow, because they apparently don't have phones at Zillow. You can't actually call them at any time. But we, over time, have developed some relationships with some email addresses, and we have started to get some really good response when something like this goes wrong. But you need to tell your seller that you, as the agent, and either Kevin Cameron or Kevin Larson as the broker, do not control, maintain, or update any of these portals. We don't have that power. And trust me, I've had many nights where I wish I did, but we don't have that power. We don't own the website, right? So we can't tell Zillow, hey, Zillow, you got to update this or else, because Zillow is taking the listings from our MLS and they are posting them in order to drive ad revenue for the other products and services that they sell. So your listing happens to be the product. The viewers of Zillow actually happen to also be the product, and the revenue that they're generating is coming from the ads that they're showing those people that are looking at Zillow. But why do we still use Zillow? Because they have a lot of eyeballs, right? That's why we're willing to send that listing over to Zillow, so that, because all those eyeballs that are on there. And guess whose eyeballs are probably the most important in this particular situation? Your seller's eyeballs. Those are probably the most important eyeballs when it comes to one of these listings. So make sure you're checking that information, right? Make sure that when the thing goes live, Zillow pulls from both of our MLSs about every 30 minutes. So that means that once it goes live, once one of our front office people have got that loaded and ready to go, after about 30 minutes to an hour, you should probably go look at your own listing on Zillow and Realtor. Those are the two you probably want to go to first. Make sure that the photos are right. Make sure that the beds and the bath and the square footage are right. Make sure all of those little details are right. And also, please make sure the map is correct, right? So and if it's not, you get a hold of me.
You let Joe know. So let's take this back one step. You have a frantic seller. Oh wait, that never happens. A frantic seller calling you and saying, Kristen, what have you done for me lately? My listing is even wrong on Realtor.com and it's all your fault. And you say, oh gosh, Realtor.com. Our company syndicates to over 100 portals, which leads to thousands of websites. And can you imagine all those lines of code that can potentially get broken? Well, let me do this for you. Let's understand the problem, and I've got a team of people that can work on this, and I'll let you know as soon as it's updated. But work to calm them down first, because Joe and I get a lot of calls from realtors that their hair is on fire, and it's because their client lit their hair on fire. So work to kind of calm them down and understand that this is very, very manual and technical process. And there are so many places that it can break. And actually, when I think about this in detail, and when Joe and I have in-depth discussions, I'm surprised it doesn't break more often, those lines of code. 10 is out of place, and all of a sudden that home is listed in Connecticut instead of Utah. So just make sure that you understand that there is a variety of technical issues going on here, but you have a team of people that can help you with that and get it expedited as quickly as possible. And again, this is also why you need to understand the benefit to you being with a brokerage like us, that you're not doing this all yourself. Hallelujah, right? So think about the benefits there for your clients and for the long term. If you had 10 listings or 5 listings and one broke, and would you be able to resolve that in a timely fashion on your own? So just kind of realize remember to use and reference your team of experts on the marketing and technical side as well.
Thanks, Jamie. That's a great point. I want to just kind of wrap up by kind of saying, what are the things that might be able to break? Well, we have seen everything from, we had one listing where Zillow had 3 versions of the same listing. That wasn't because it was listed on 3 different MLSs. They had a listing version that came from the proper MLS that had the proper pictures, had the proper square footage, had the proper beds, bath, and so on. They had a second listing that the previous owner of the home, so not the seller that was currently trying to sell the home, the previous owner had created inside of Zillow on their own that had totally different pictures, like taken off of an old iPhone 7 type pictures, right? Then we had a third listing that we could not figure out where it was coming from because it had all the information was completely incorrect. That took about 2 days to clean up. But at the end of that, what we had was a single listing that had the proper photos, the proper information, and everything that came from Zillow. Very recently in Realtor.com, we had, for some reason, Realtor.com was showing pictures that were used as placeholders when the MLS listing form was first used. And even though the newer pictures had been displaying properly on Realtor.com for over 3 weeks, all of a sudden it reverted back and started showing completely old pictures from a listing. We talked about the mapping situation. We talked about beds and baths. We talked about square footage. We've also had many different price variations. Jamie mentioned, with all the lines of code, we had one situation where I don't understand how it possibly happened, but they took the price of the home and they just rounded it up to the next 100,000. So I think if I had it right, it was like 478.5, and they just rounded it up to 5,000. And so that we, obviously we have an agent like, well, if somebody bought it for 5,000, that'd be great, 500,000. But obviously the seller was concerned that when somebody is searching for a price range, and that's why you price these particular homes at a certain spot, right? To get them inside of a price range where someone is searching for, the home wasn't showing up on those search results. Whatever the situation has to be, if something's not going correctly, you first start with the MLS. So if something isn't displaying right on the MLS, log in with your agent login and go look at the data that is part of that listing. Verify that everything on that listing is correct. If it's not correct, then you start by calling, whichever office that you're currently working with, whoever did the listing load for you, and letting them know that there's something amiss or something that's not correct. And then we go from there. If it's not syndicating correctly, if it's correct on the MLS, but it's not correct on the other spot, that's when you get a hold of me, and we'll dig in and we'll get it fixed. Another thing to tell your seller when they're panicked is that we will do everything we can on our end, but that we don't ultimately control what they display. So even though that there's lots of things that can break, and don't worry, I've got a team that's going to be on it, it's important for you to know that you can't just defer the entire problem. Yeah, those guys at Zillow are jerks, because that's not what we're saying here. What we're saying is that there's a lot of ways this can break, but ultimately understand that you're going to do everything you can as an agent by pulling in your team who's going to work on this until we can get it displayed correctly. Sometimes I've had fixes from Realtor and Zillow and some of these other places in less than a half an hour. We sent an email out, we explained the problem, we got a verification that support ticket had been created, and 35 minutes later, the problem was fixed. I've also had issues like we're talking about that one with at Realtor.com, the one that has the missing pin. That's a much more complicated problem because Realtor is using the data from Google Maps, and Google Maps wasn't updated, right? So now we've got to wait for the giant of Google to update the maps to have that translate across and make sure that shows up correctly on the Realtor.com site. Lots of different pieces here. Thankfully, you don't have to worry about those things. All you have to worry about is getting an email to us, making sure that we have a detailed description of what's going wrong, and then let us go to work and try to fix the problem. Jamie, that's about all we want to cover from my side.
And another great element to show your value and add your value is you have a team of people behind you that can help you. As of some of these smaller brokerages, you can't talk to a human. So use that to your benefit. This listing syndication process. Also, talk about the complexities and the intricacies and the details and hundreds of lines of code. And that's why the brokerage handles it for you and for your clientele. Now, going back to the beginning, I think it's very important. And Hannah Hoffman and Hillary List and Courtney and Angelica and Jennifer will also attest, get that paperwork in correctly to begin with. That will solve 90% of your listing syndication problems if you get that paperwork in. So I know we're busy, we're all flying around 100 miles an hour. Take the extra 5 minutes to double, triple check that listing paperwork. It's going to serve you well in the long run. It'll reduce headaches in the long run. But also know that we have a very specific process to make sure that we can handle this all for you guys. And again, we don't care where the buyer comes from. We just want as many eyeballs on it as possible. Joe, could you let me share my screen real quick? I want to show one last graphic to make sure that we're all on the same page, to let your clientele know and hopefully secure more listings. Let your clientele know the listing syndication process. I think this graphic shows a lot of what we're going to do. And in a very kind of clear, simple format, is making sure that once it's in through the MLS and the BHHS website, so really that's us in the middle, it's not necessarily our website, we're handling the intake properly, and we're syndicating it out to all of these major hubs. And you'll see some competing brokerages there. And absolutely, we don't care if someone is a buyer and they're looking at Keller Williams, they see your listing, it doesn't matter where that buyer comes from. So we're playing very fair with our listings. We're not holding our listings hostage. We don't want to hide our listings and only make sure we're going to double side those through internal sales. We're putting them in front of as many eyeballs as possible so that your clientele can showcase and sell that, and you can be the hero to your clients. So with that, I want to say thank you. We had some good questions in the chat function. I think we'll do a ListHub class here real soon, Joe, on the details of ListHub. And if you have any other questions, just let us know. As always, shoot us an email to marketing@BHHS-Utah or joe@bhhsutah.com. And we are here for you guys. And thanks so much. And we'll talk to you guys real soon. Have a great weekend.